सा नहीं है उसका कोई ना कोई सानी बाकी वही हमेशा खैर उसके सुख है पानी खैरों से दिल लगाना जुती है सुख कहानी सुख है वो ही है एक दिल का यार जानी दिल में मारा यही है सुभाना मुन्यालानी
A world away from the wealth and multiculturalism of the UK's capital, there is a small seaside town in the northeast of England. Hartlepool has a Christian heritage stretching back for 1,000 years. But half a century ago, Islam arrived for the very first time when a young doctor and his wife moved to the area.
Dr. Khan was the medical registrar, and he came to work on the ward where I was working as a staff nurse. And he'd been working a few months at the hospital, and I used to see them going out in the evening sometimes from the hospital, the ward office window. I could see them going up and down the drive together, Dr. Khan and his wife, and going out for a walk in the evening. And it was Christmas time, and at Christmas time you give each other gifts. So I thought, well, I'll go and introduce myself to his wife. And I just went to the flat where they were living, which was just just above the entrance to the hospital. And I knocked on the door, and they welcomed me in. And I gave them the gifts, and that was the beginning of a very long friendship.
And my husband, Terry, he was a patient at his surgery, and we used to go down there. Dr. Khan asked him to see what work he does, and my husband said he was a joiner, and he said, oh well, I want somebody, to come to the house and do a bit of joining work for us. So he went round and done a bit of work for him, and then from then on, every time he wanted something doing, he used to send for Terry, because he used to say he's a good joiner. And then after a while, Mrs. Khan asked us to come round for a bit of dinner, to come round for some dinner. Anyway, I said it was very nice of them. Anyway, we went round one night, and she cooked all this dinner, and it was lovely.
Gugu Begum. Tayyiba Gugu? Right.
We were very fortunate that when we were quite young, I was about 8, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis visited Hartlepool as part of his visit to the UK.
Dr. Hamid and Mrs. Khan had been honoured to welcome Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad, the global Imam and Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, to their home. Now, Mrs. Khan wished to introduce her friend Pam.
I did meet the third Khalifa as well, but that was in Rubwa. That was my daughter. We went to a wedding of one of Dr. Khan's family members, and my daughter Tara was with me, and everybody was in the lounge, and she just ran over and sat on his knee. Before the wedding, I remember going with Mrs. Khan for a mulaqat, and on that occasion, I asked him if he would pray for my daughter, and he said he would pray for her to be intelligent, and mashallah, she turned out to be very intelligent. But it's strange that that she got a first from Cambridge, and I think that's quite sort of not a common thing to happen, really. I think the press affected her quite a bit.
The Khans migrated to the UK in the 1960s from the town of Rabwa, Pakistan. It was during her childhood in Rabwa that Sajda first became interested in faith.
When she was quite young, she told us that she had a dream that Khalifatul Masih Sani came to her and said that "Jab tum 35 saal ki hogi, main tumhare upar jadoo karunga," which means that when you are about 35, I will change you with the kind of magic.
In 1981, only in her mid-30s, Mrs. Khan became seriously ill.
Sajda Hamid from Hartlepool. First of all, she saw in a dream that there was a red double-decker bus who was, rushing on towards him, and she thought she will be crushed under. And also she had the feeling that I must somehow save myself. So she pushed the bus with her hand, the palm of her hand. And to her surprise, the bus stopped and she got saved. When she related this dream to her friend, her name is Palm, she interpreted it. She said, "You are going to have an attack from a very serious disease, because the red bus means illness to me. But despite the fact that apparently you will have no chance of survival, Allah would save you." So she fell ill, as was predicted in the dream, and she was saved as well. And she told Palm that now it's all right. She said, "No, it's not all right. You saw a double-decker, so the disease is going to visit you again, and this time maybe more seriously." So actually it happened so that she suffered from cancer, and the case was so advanced that the doctors lost hope.
My parents went to see Khalifatul Masih Salis for a mulaqat or some such occasion, and he sort of gave her a prayer or a dua and sort of said that don't worry about this anymore, it's gone. And my father particularly took this as sort of a prophecy or a sign.
The doctors almost thought she was dead, although I don't know whether she was clinically declared dead or not, but the doctors had given up hope and finished everything. At that moment, she was witnessing something of the other world. She saw in the dream that she was already dead, and she was raised to the heaven and was brought to the presence of Allah. And she beseeched Allah that she had left small children, young of age, and she's very worried for their sake. So please return me to earth. And Allah said, "You're already dead." So she said, what then? You are the proprietor of everything. You are the master of life and death. You can send me back even if I am dead. So Allah said, "But you know how much time has passed? You are dead for the last 5,000 years. So she said, "What then? You are the master not only of space, but master of time. You can reverse the clock of time as you please." So don't feed me with this, that sort of answer. So, and then Allah said, "All right, I'll send you back, but with two signs, so that when you tell this story, people believe in what you tell them. And the two signs which will be shown to you would be these. Number one, although the doctors will give you blood transfusion, but you don't need any blood transfusion. So don't take. Secondly, you will feel immense pain, most terrible pain, and the doctors would fail to cure whatever they do." So with that, abruptly the interview ended and she came back to life. And suddenly the doctors saw the signs of breathing and things. Already she was on blood transfusion for some time. and a quarter of that bottle was already emptied when this had happened. So when she noticed that bottle, she remembered Allah's message that she doesn't require any blood transfusion. So she removed the needle by just a jerk of the hand. So the doctor insisted that I must put the needle back in the vein. And she insisted, no, Allah has told me, but he wouldn't believe naturally. So he forcefully injected the needle into her artery or vein, whatever it was, perhaps artery. And the result was that immediately she threw a reaction so strong, allergic reaction, that the whole body became swollen. And the doctor got panicky and removed the needle from her body. Now this is something very special, because it is an established fact, scientific observation, that if you do not throw reaction against a blood transfusion, once the same blood in the same instance simply fails to cause any other reaction. The reaction of the body from the same blood which was being given her is something unknown in the scientific medical history. So the doctor was so shocked, he said, I can't understand what's happening. Then the second thing followed exactly as she was told by Allah. She suffered from abnormal pain in the region of operation, and the doctors, despite their best efforts, though they gave her the heaviest drugs, failed to cure her of that pain. And after some futile efforts, they failed. They said they gave up. They told the husband that we can't do anything. All that we could, we have done. So then, these were the two miracles shown to her in the dream, which came to pass as were predicted. But a third also happened. A third part of the miracle, came later, when she was visited suddenly by her father, who had heard of the operation and who hurried to England, immediately rushed to England to meet his dear daughter. He thought maybe she dies in the operation, so he wanted to reach the place before the operation. But he was late. When he reached the hospital, that was the state in which Sajda was lying, suffering with extremely acute pain. And she heard that her father had arrived, and she did not want to meet him in this state of pain. So she prayed that, Allah, all right, we have shown the miracles enough, and enough is enough. So cure me before my father calls me. And the next minute she saw there was no pain. It was there and not there, like that. Next minute, or within 4 to 5 minutes before the father arrived, it had totally disappeared, completely gone. And ever since she is leading a normal life, not only that, she has given birth to a beautiful young baby. And both are healthy and normal, although the doctors had told that after suffering from cancer and having gone through this very serious observation and this experience of near death, you should never think of bearing children again. It's a brother. What's his name? Abid.
By 1982, Mrs. Khan had recovered. Meanwhile in Rabwa, Hazrat Mirza طاہر Ahmad had become the new Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
Before Hazur migrated to the UK, obviously he was living in Rabwa, and my father thought that us kids weren't getting enough exposure to the Khalifa, so his plan was to take us back to Rabwa, basically so that we would then get the exposure to Hazur. He thought that his kids are growing up in the West and they have little or no contact with Hazur, they don't really know who Hazur is.
They went to see Khalifatul Masih Rabi about this idea, and Khalifatul Masih Rabi said that, no, I'm not going to let you go back to Pakistan until you have converted at least 10 families to Ahmadiyyat. And my mother came out of this mulaqat really shocked and thinking, how will I ever convert 10 families to Ahmadiyyat?
Mrs. Khan now began to preach to the people of Hartlepool, starting with her oldest friend, Pamela Elder.
I would say probably every other day I was at their house. I think my mum thought I was moving in. So anyway, it was always Mrs. Khan that I was friendly with, and we used to chat about all sorts of things, and we were friends for quite a few years before the topic of religion was broached. I think she thought she might frighten me off if she started immediately talking about religion.
My father initially thought that my mother was very enthusiastic about Tabligh and wasn't sure. He was a quiet man, so I think it was harder for him initially to be as enthusiastic as her.
Mrs. Khan used to have meetings in the house, and she called, various members of the senior members of the community to talk, and on a couple of occasions George Yusufullah Khan came to speak, and it was after one of his talks that I decided to do Bayat then.
Dr. Khan had initially been shy, but was inspired by his wife's success to invite English gentlemen to Islam.
I was in a public house in Stockton with a friend having a drink, and he told me that his wife had met a lovely doctor's wife, and they were Muslims, and she'd been to see them. And she said, what nice people they were. So he said to me, would you like to come and visit them? So I said, yes, I don't see why not. So I went there to Connersliff Road, and I was immediately taken by Dr. Khan, because he was such a shy, reticent, but very, 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 very kind man. And he stood at the door, and I can still see him standing at the door and saying to me, hello, hello, come in, come in. We had a very, very nice talk, and then he gave me some little pamphlets. One was Jesus on the cross, and another little, and so I'd read them, and then you see, it's quite a shock to the system to be told, after you've been brought up with a religion all your life, from being a baby, that Jesus didn't die on the cross, that he just swooned, and then he was, Joseph Arimathea took him away, and he was put in the tomb. And then after 3 days, they got him better and brought him, and everybody thought he'd been resurrected. And now it seems so simple.
One of Mr. Khan's earliest successes came with the conversion of a policeman, the late Alex Duxfield. Mr. Duxfield now began to invite his colleagues to Islam.
I'd reached an age when I was about 35 when I prayed to God that he gives me a friend who had the same sort of utopian ideals as me, living in a nice, peaceful world. And I remember about a month or so later, my auntie, who lives in Scotland, she got in touch with me. She's a very staunch Christian and avid Bible reader, and I thought this was my prayer answered. And I used to read the Bible many times, but whatever question I asked my auntie, she couldn't give me a satisfactory answer. One other police officer in the building, his name was Alex Duxfield, he obviously conversed with Dr. Khan quite a lot about religion, and it was about 1985, 86, that Dr. Khan must have asked him to ask me if I would go to his house. Because Alex Duxfield must have told him I was a confirmed Christian. So through this third party, he asked me to go, and I've said categorically to Alex Duxfield, no, I don't want to go. Because my idea of Muslims was what I was taught at school many years before, when the Crusades, these English kings, these European kings went to the Holy Land to fight these Saracens. And they were always classed as the good guys, and the Saracens, the not so good people. So that was my initial idea of Muslims, so I didn't want anything to do with it. And at that time, I believe also the Ayatollah Khomeini had returned to Iran, and there was problems in the Muslim world as then. So English people didn't have a very good knowledge of Islam. So I said, no, I wouldn't go.
True worship of God leads a righteous man to do good to mankind. It is impossible to love God and ignore His creation. In this connection, Islam makes no distinction between a Muslim and a non-Muslim.
But later on, I was doing some work in the hospital, the local hospital, and Dr. Khan happened to meet me there, and he personally invited me to his house. And of course, although I knew him very well, and I also found him a very nice man, I just, still being a sort of a shy person, I thought he's comes from a completely different background than me. We're different religions, different professions, and I just didn't want to go for some reason. And he set a date, so I had no choice. I had to accept. And it was probably about 10 or 12 days we could fix a date. And for those 10 or 12 days, every night I was quite nervous, thinking about having to go to this house to talk to a Muslim. And on the day in question, it was an evening appointment. I drove around the estate quite a few times because I didn't want to go in the house. I knew nothing about Islam. I thought, I'll go and convert Dr. Khan to Christianity.
With the Khans busy preaching to Maurice Threlkeld, Bill Atkinson and other English friends, the Khalifa began to take a special interest in Hartlepool.
My mother used to speak to Hazur quite regularly on the telephone and so on to get advice, and he would always have time for her. And then also he made a lot of effort to make trips to Hartlepool on several occasions to meet with the people that were already converted, but also the people that were under Tabligh.
My first meeting with him, this was before I became an Ahmadi. I'd been invited to Dr. Khan's house for a meal, and I don't think he told me who he was expecting guests. But anyway, I knew he was building a new dining room onto his house. And I thought, that's strange having guests when he's having building work done, because the plaster was still wet in the dining room. Anyway, I arrived that night, it was full of people. And then he invited me to come have a meal in the dining room, and there was a gentleman with a turban on. And I sat next to him, and he engaged me in so many questions and things like that. And I thought, what a wonderful chap this is. I had no idea he was Khalifa, because I wasn't dressed appropriately anyway. But I thought he was very interesting and very friendly. He was so jovial. And he made you so relaxed.
And though I never realised what an important man he was and what a religious man he was, it was just like speaking to you. And I just sat there talking to him about different one thing and another. And then we had a meal, and he was there, and I sat here, and he was telling us about his exploits when he left Pakistan, when he had to escape to go to the London Mosque. After that, it happened very, very quickly, within a state of a month. I said I wanted to sign the bait. I'd only been signed for about 5 minutes, and the phone rang, and Hamid said, it's Hazur. I've just told him I've got a new convert, and he wants to speak to you. Now, this shows you that I didn't know all that much about it, but I knew in my own heart that it was the right thing for me to do. But Hazur says to me, Assalamu alaikum. Now, I said, oh, thank you very much, because I didn't know I should have said, wa alaikum assalam, which was the thing to do. But you see, you've got to learn all these things, haven't you? Anyway, I spoke to him, and he said, I thought I saw a little spark there, he said. And then he wrote me a very, very nice letter welcoming to the Jamaat, which I've got framed, which I've above my bed at home. And that was it in 1987. So, That's beautiful. And I've got a picture of the late Hazur as well, above it, and the thing below it. So it's always there in my mind. See it every day.
One book which I was really attracted to was Jesus in India. That was more or less the deciding factor when I found out that God hadn't killed his own son or asked him to give his life for others, and he actually survived the cross. That was the turning point for me. And one night it was a Saturday evening, I told my wife that I was going to accept Ahmadiyyat the next day. She wasn't very happy, but she said, yes, if you have to, you have to.
The day that my husband converted, the missionary said, he popped his head, he knocked on the door, and he said, congratulations, and it's your turn next. And I said, that's what you think. And I was sort of determined that I wasn't going to convert.
Well, my wife, Christine, she was very well into these church meetings and different things, and she became part of a church committee, and of course teaching at Sunday school. And she found it very nice. There was very nice people there as well. And when I initially told her about Islam, she wasn't angry, but perhaps she was perplexed. Why didn't I go to church? And then Dr. Khan's wife, Sajida, said, why don't you ask her to come to our house? When you come, I'll have a talk with her. And I felt a bit, I can't express. But anyway, I thought, I'll take it. I thought she might be a little hostile. So we went there, and she was not hostile, but it was a heated argument.
She was quite surprised and perhaps not so pleased by this change in him. But because she was a very, and has always been a very loyal wife, she would accompany him when he would come and see my father on a weekly basis. And this continued for a long time, where she would come and she would sit with my mother. Initially, I actually remember that she looked quite serious and perhaps even somewhat unhappy.
Christine Atkinson remained perplexed with Islam, but Mrs. Khan's friend Beryl Taylor was proving more receptive.
And she used to read the Quran to us and that, in English. And she kept asking me all the time, all the years, would you like to change? And I was a little bit unsure, And she used to say to me, one of these days it will, somebody will come to you. And if it does, would you tell me? And I said yes. Anyway, I went to bed one night and I had this dream about a white lady, and asking me, to go, to be a Muslim and everything. And was kept going, kept like putting the arm up to come to him, or, to come to her all the time. Anyway, after that, I kept having the same dream all the time, and I thought, well, it's funny, to have the same dream all the time for a week, Anyway, when I went round Mrs. Khan's, I told her about it. And she said, I told you would get a sign, to be a Muslim.
The number of people, the converts to Ahmadiyyat increased, and the number of visitors or people interested in Ahmadiyyat increased. And the house in which Dr. Khan lived was a rather large house, but it became so full of people we had no room, so to speak, for Friday prayers. And then he had a double garage.
And then he turned around and said, I've got a really big job for you, Uncle Terry, he used to say. I've got a big job for you, Terry. And Terry said, well, that's all right. He said, would you mind if you turned the garage into a mosque? Well, he was over the moon.
The second mention in his revelation about the British is that he saw himself in England, catching white birds And he interpreted this dream as the British people accepting Islam. I have chosen Hartlepool to mention this particularly because here I see the seed of the fruition of these prophecies. Here I see the development of a community which is characteristically British, overwhelmingly British, not made of components from Pakistan mainly, but mainly the British people themselves, were also, with the grace of Allah, very devout and very sincere in their attempt to learn Islam.
Beryl's husband Terry transformed the garage into a mosque, and now the Khans began to preach to a new family.
Well, it started off with my brother Paul, and he kept it very, very quiet to himself. And then I used to pay visits to my parents, and periodically my brother Paul used to disappear, and I kept saying to my mum, "Where's our Paul gone?" She used to say, "Oh, he's just gone in another room." And I said, "Well, he's been gone an awfully long time." Then all of a sudden she told me that he'd gone in to say his prayers. And I was like, "What?" She said, "Oh, yes." And slowly, he started to change as a person, and he got really nice. And then all of a sudden I was like totally taken back, because I just couldn't believe like the change in him. And then he was talking to my mother a lot, and he kept saying, "You'll have to come to prayers on Friday. No, you keep going, you keep doing what you're doing, and maybe." And then one day I'd said I would go through to see her, and she said, "Oh no, I'm going to meet our Paul's friends, Sajida and Dr. Khan." She said to me, "Would you like to come? Would you like to come and meet Dr. Khan and Sajida and his family?" And I said, "Okay, yes, I'll come." So that was 3 of us started to come on a Friday. And then I think my father, Bill, started to get like a bit left out. You know, and he kept saying, "Well, where you're all going?" So he asked me, he said, "Are you going on a Friday, our Vivian?" So I said, "Yes." I said, "Would you like to come?" He said, "Yeah, I think I will come." So that's how we all started to come. And then Auntie Lily, my mum's cousin, used to visit us and stay maybe for a month or 2 weeks, whatever. And she got curious, and she started to ask my mother and my father and Paul, and they said, "Would you like to come along?" And she did. And then they got all of us.
In total, 6 members of the Hedges family accepted Islam: Paul, his mother Marion, father William, sister Vivian, Aunt Lillian, and wife Rose. The new converts began to receive attention from the national media, and Mrs. Khan's photo was featured in the Telegraph. Soon, these converts were spreading the message of Islam around the world. Pamela Elder, a nurse, travelled to Rabwa to help develop the town's medical facilities. Meanwhile, Dr. Khan took a delegation of converts to the Jalsa Salana in Qadian. Bilal Atkinson performed Waqf-e Arzi in Russia, where he helped sow the seeds of Ahmadiyyat. The Islamic lifestyle was quite a change for some of the new converts.
I'd said to Ahmad when I went, he said, "I'm not going to tell you to stop drinking." He said, Islam is you can make your own decision what you want to do. You're not forced to do anything. And I said, but he said, when you will stop eventually. And I didn't believe him. Then I did have a little lapse, unfortunately. I lost my job and I got very depressed. And I'd said to Hamid, I said, if I hadn't become an Ahmadi, I would have committed suicide. And that's a terrible thing to do. I mean, that's the worst sin you can possibly do. And Bilal came to the house one day and wondered, why we hadn't seen me. And I was absolutely, I was inebriated. So I could hardly stand up. And he was very upset, and he said, well, get yourself right. And I said, don't go tell anyone, will you? And so, and obviously told Hamid.
Only a brief word about alcohol. There is no doubt that it is causing immense harm to the social, moral, and physical fabric of the society. Its effects are responsible for most of the crime in this country. Medical authorities in this country have consistently and strongly advised the government to take steps to reduce its consumption. The problem is that the majority of society is involved in the consumption and totally helpless to do anything about it. It is like a weighty chain around the neck that is too heavy to remove.
And Hamid rang the Khalifa and told him and said that Maurice is in a bad way. Or they used to call me Mahmoud, which I quite liked, Mahmoud, because he was nearest to get to Maurice. So what a kind man. He sent me some homeopathic medicine. It was just a tiny little bottle like that, with a little dropper on. And he said, get a glass of cold water and put 2 drops in the water. And he said, drink it, take it every day, and it'll take all the urge to drink away. And it did, it worked. Just a simple thing like that.
Islamic teaching is meant to change us from a simple human being into a moral one, and then from a moral human being into a godly one. Alcohol poisons the tree of morality. We cannot hope to move towards morality or God and indulge in alcohol at the same time.
And with Dad, of course, when he found out I was a Muslim, he was very annoyed about it. Oh, Muslim, man, you should be, and all this. Anyway, I told him this. And so when he came, and of course, when my dad met me, he was so quiet, so timid, and mate said to him, well, he said, Mr. Threlkeld, he said, how do you prefer Maurice Threlkeld, as you know him, or is Mahmoud Karim, as we know him, as a sober man and getting on in his life, or do you remember him when he was, he said, yes, he said, I do. I prefer him as he is now. And he never ever forgot that, my father, because when he was very, very ill, because he died with the cancer, and I used to go out and I stayed with him, and he said to me, go for prayers. So from being anti-Muslim and Islam, he became pro, just like that. And I only met Dr. Gardner once.
In 1994, Mrs. Khan's cancer returned. Nevertheless, she continued to care for the Ahmadis of Hartlepool.
One particular evening, I was going through a bad time myself, and I was at my mother's, and my father wasn't alive then, and Sajida really was not in a well state herself, and it must have been about something to 7, and a knock came to Marion's door, my mother, and she said, go and see who's at the door, Vivian. And when I opened the door, it was Sajida. And I said, come in. She said, oh, I can't come in. I'm in a rush. And she had 2 bags of shopping. And she just put them down at the front door. And I said, what do you want me to do? She said, oh, they're for you. And I leant over to thank her, and she just said, the basics, what you're going to need. And she said, I'm going to have to go. But she said, I had to do this. She said, because there was no way I was going to sit down and eat my meal, knowing that you had nothing. And it was the most touching thing that anyone has ever done for me. If somebody had brought me a case full of diamonds, it meant more because it was all the things I needed. There was flour, sugar, potatoes, onions, veg, you name it. They were all like things, your everyday things, but were very important. And I'll never ever forget her for that. And it must have been a strain for her to do it, because she really wasn't very well.
Mrs. Khan had now been preaching to Christine Atkinson for several years without success. With her cancer spreading, time was running out.
And even when she was really, really ill and she knew that she was dying, she never ever said, "Are you going to convert?" She always took an interest in what you said. She always respected what you said. And although she didn't agree with some of the things you said, she still accepted that was your opinion.
She was so enthusiastic that even when she was very ill at the end of her life, she had cancer and it had affected her memory. But even though she didn't have all the words to speak, even when she would see the nurses that would come and to look after her, she would start preaching to them and talking about God and how the existence of God. Her uncle, Mamu Manan, visited us, and he observed that she would often have a lot of pain, but whenever any of her the English ladies that had converted or the people that she was preaching to came to visit, she would sit up and appear as if she was well and would talk to them quite happily until they left, and then it was obvious again, and it was apparent that she was quite unwell and in pain. And he asked her that, how do you manage to do this? And she said it was because she didn't want any of the ladies that she had told and taught so much about God to think for even a second that she was in pain and that perhaps God had not helped her.
I used to have a dream that there was a white shiny shape at the end of my bed, and I used to wake up screaming when the shape was here. It frightened me. And I used to everybody in the house woke up and used to be frightened because I'd had this dream. And over the years, she moved around my bed, and I got really frightened because I thought I was going to die. And she got closer and closer. And this happened over a period of a long time. And then I had one dream where she was there, but she bent over me and I saw her face for the first time. And it wasn't a lady, it was a man. I didn't know who this man was. And it wasn't until a long time after that I'd been going to Dr. Khan's that I actually saw a photograph of him. And so Dr. Khan and Saida arranged for me to go and meet him. And when I went into his office, he was dressed all in white, just like in my dream, and his face was glowing like it was in my dream. And I'd never seen anybody with such a serene and beautiful face.
Wa alaikum assalam, Christine, how are you?
I had a dream that my father was ill and in hospital, and my mother and my brother and myself were crying. And I told them that I'd have to go and leave them. And my mother said no, and I said, no, I have to go, I have to leave. And I woke up crying and I was so upset. And then afterwards, we had an appointment to go and see Hazur. And we went in his office and he said salam to everybody. And then he said, you know, Christine, there comes a point when you have to leave your family. And my heart was just pounding because in my mind I thought he knows about my dream. And how does he know about my dream? So Sajida was saying, tell him about your dream. So I told him. And he said, you're going to leave your family spiritually, not physically. And now's the time you have to think what you're going to do. Which path are you going to take? And so when we came out from his office, I told Dr. Khan that I would read a Holy Quran, because I'd never read a Holy Quran from beginning to end. I'd heard verses from it, and I'd heard some of my husband explained some of the commentary. But I'd never actually held one. And then Daddy Uma, Dr. Khan's mother gave me a copy of a Holy Quran. And when I took it off her, my hand was shaking, and a voice inside said, "There's no turning back." And I read it, but before I'd finished reading it, I knew then I was going to convert.
It was a total shock. It was completely out of the blue, but instead of euphoria, I was so happy. At last, 5 years of preaching, not only Sajid did most of the preaching, but I used to do it as well. And I think she just lost the argument, so to speak, and just accepted that what we were saying was true. And she was very influenced by the fourth Khalifa. She loved him very much.
In December 1994, Sajda Khan passed away.
Khalifatul Masih Rabi was very pleased with the fact that, mashallah, both my parents were trying so hard in Tabligh. And he even said to her that, inshallah, your name will be remembered in the history of UK ladies as Queen Victoria, as a sort of compliment that, mashallah, she was so good at her Tabligh efforts.
جو عزیزہ ساجدہ حمید کی نماز جنازہ غائب ہے. عام طور پر تو میں حاضر جنازوں کے ساتھ غائب جنازے پڑھ دیا کرتا ہوں، لیکن اس ملک میں انہوں نے ایک ایسا عظیم کارنامہ کیا ہے، اس کی وجہ سے میں چاہتا ہوں کہ نمایاں طور پر ان کی نماز جنازہ ادا کی جائے، اور اس میں ساری دنیا بھی دعا میں شامل ہو جائے گی. یعنی نماز جنازہ تو ہمارے ساتھ نہیں پڑھ سکتی، اور دعا میں شامل ہو جائے گی. ان دونوں میاں بیوی ڈاکٹر حمید اور ساجدہ نے مجھے لکھا کہ ہم چاہتے ہیں واپس چلے جائیں، کیونکہ یہاں ہمارا پوری طرح دل بھی نہیں لگ رہا اور کام بھی ٹھیک سیٹ نہیں ہو رہا ہے، تو ہمیں اجازت دیں کہ ہم واپس چلے جائیں. ان کو میں نے لکھا کہ خاص طور پر ساجدہ کو مخاطب کر کے کہا کہ تم کیا پیچھے چھوڑ کے جاؤ گی، کوئی تم نے جماعت نہیں بنائی، خالی ہاتھ یہاں سے جانے کو تمہیں بھجوانے کو میرا دل نہیں چاہتا، اس لیے چلے جانا، مگر تھوڑی دیر کے لیے ٹال دو اس فیصلے کو، اور کوشش کرو خدا تمہیں توفیق دے یہاں جماعت قائم ہو جائے. اس کے نتیجے میں دونوں بہت ہی صحیح فطرت تھے، حمید تو ہیں بھی، انہوں نے فوری فیصلہ کیا کہ ہم جب تک یہاں جماعت قائم نہیں کریں گے ہم نہیں جائیں گے. اور پھر جماعت قائم کی، جب قائم کرنے کی توفیق ملی، پھر جایا کہاں جاتا تھا. اپنے روحانی بچے، ان کی روحانی ماں بنی ہوئی، ایسی تربیت ان کی اور اتنا پیار تھا آپس میں. یہ ان کے وصال کے بعد ہمارے جو دیکھنے والے، ملنے والے وہاں گئے تھے جنازے کے بعد شامل ہونے کے لیے، وہ بتاتے ہیں کہ والہانہ محبت کا اظہار تھا ان انگریزوں کی طرف سے جنہوں نے ساجدہ کے فیض سے اسلام قبول کیا، اور بہت اچھی تربیت. اور انگلستان میں ایک ہی جماعت تھی، ابھی تک شاید یہ ایک ہی ہو، جس میں انگریزوں کا غلبہ تھا اور غیر ملکی نسبتاً کم تھے. کیونکہ انہوں نے بعد میں ہمیں لکھ دیا کہ اب ہمارا جانے کو دل نہیں چاہتا. اس لیے جب جنازے کا سوال ہوا نعش کا کہاں دفنائی جائے، میں نے ڈاکٹر حمید سے کہا کہ وہیں دفنائیں، اسی سے زمین کا اب حق ہے کہ ان کو اپنے پاس رکھے. تو انشاءاللہ عصر کی نماز کے مان بعد ساجدہ کی نماز جنازہ ہوگی.
Mrs. Khan's youngest son, Abid, was only 11 years old.
My mother passed away, I think it was the 3rd of December in 1994. About a week later, I got a message from Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi through one of his family members that Ramzan is coming, and so you should come and spend a week with me, or spend some time with me. And I was really amazed. Hazur had never said anything like this before. I was just a young boy. Who am I to go and spend time with Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi? But Hazur arranged for me to stay in the same room with his grandchildren, Mirza Usman Saab and his other brother Mirza Adnan. And it was a really, really precious period for me. I got to see Hazur so much more than I could ever expected or ever deserved. but I still thought I would just be doing seri on my own. But then I was taken to the same place, where the same dining room where Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabe used to do seri, and every day he used to check my nashta, my breakfast, to see what I was having, and he used to encourage me to eat more. He always used to say to me, make sure you have some yogurt, because that will help you on the fast. One thing Hazur told me, he said that make sure in the afternoon you come with me on a walk. And I used to go, Hazur used to, I think it was after Asr prayer, used to go for a walk for about an hour, even during the Ramzan. And me and his grandson Usman used to walk alongside him. Everyone else was further back, and he would talk to us some of the time, tell us some stories, and then other times Hazur would be silent and quiet and just reflecting. One day I was playing a board game. I was 11 or 12, and Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabe came upstairs, and he saw me, and he didn't say anything in a harsh way, but he just said to me, he said that in Ramzan, is it a good idea to be playing games, board games? And then with that, he just walked off without saying anything, with a smile. And anyway, I knew straight away that it's not correct, and these type of things we should abstain from, especially in Ramzan. And so I wrote him a letter, even though I was staying in the same house, saying that I'm sorry I did this and this was my mistake. He must have read the letter, because he came upstairs a few hours later after all his day's activities were come, and Hazur said, I've read your letter, and then Hazur hugged me. And that was a really beautiful moment. And the thing is that again, that was the way he did tarbiyat, but also just that whole love and affection, I'm sure, and was a direct result that he knew that my mother had passed away, and he wanted to help me and give me contentment, which is what he did. And the same the year after as well. I mean, I thought it was a one-off, but the year after again, I got the same message that you should come to London and spend Ramzan with me, or some of Ramzan with me.
Dr. Khan's preaching mission continued. The next family to join would be the Wrigleys, led by the late Edward Wrigley.
He was a very, very nice man, very simple man. And after he converted to Islam, we used to go regularly to his house, and always by the side of his chair was a copy of the Holy Quran. He was a fisherman, and one morning when Khalifatul Rabe was visiting Fajr prayer, Mr. Wrigley came and Hazur said, oh, how are you? He said, oh, it doesn't matter about me. He said, what I'm concerned is, how are you? So, of course, Hazur was laughing at that. He liked Eddie Wrigley very much.
By 1997, the Khalifa was staying at Hartlepool several times annually. That year, Hazur would bring the Urdu class.
Looks like Nabu, huh?
That was very a unique and a beautiful occasion, because it was the whole Urdu class came. I remember there were certain memorable characters. Shaukat Saiba, who had a beautiful voice, recited in Nazm. There was a character at that time well known as Mota Bacha that always used to accompany Hazur. And the rest of the class came. And one thing that Hazur would always love in Hartlepool was our memorable fish and chips. So there's a beautiful walk along the beach. So Hazur used to enjoy that. And at the end of that visit, they would also have fish and chips. And sometimes they actually had that on a couple of occasions on the promenade, and so that's something he wanted to treat the Urdu class to. And I think after that they also went on to the Lake District, and my younger brother Abid Khan Sahib, he accompanied them to the Lake District as well.
That year, Hazur brought some very special relatives: Sahibzada Mirza Muzaffar Ahmed, Sahibzada Mirza Mansoor Ahmed, and a young nephew, Sahibzada Mirza Masrur Ahmed.
There were so many guests with Hazrat Khalifa Masih Rabe that in our three-story house, Hazrat Khalifa Masih Rabe stayed with his family on the top floor. There were some other guests that stayed on the second floor, and Hazur and his father were given mattresses in our sitting room on the ground floor.
And now when I think back to it, I feel almost ashamed that these were the arrangements for our future Khalifa. But at the same time, I saw at the time that Hazur had no issue whatsoever He slept on the floor. After that, after seeing his humility, I started even writing to Hazrat Khalifah Masih V before he became Khalifa, and it was just because of that example that I'd seen in him. And so from every few months I would write to him, and sometimes he would reply, even back then, with very beautiful letters. And if he ever missed a reply, he would say, "I'm sorry, I didn't reply to your last letter," but he considered this a reply for the last few.
By the late 1990s, the Khans had converted more than 30 English adults in Hartlepool, and the local community was fast outgrowing the family's garage.
I know my father was, for many, many years, had a desire to open a mosque in Hartlepool. And you have to think of the period. At that time, the Jamaat in the UK weren't building many mosques. And so the thing is that it seemed like quite an impossible dream, to be honest.
My father went to Hartlepool Council because it was proposed, and it was very much his desire, and I'm sure he prayed very, very hard that there would be a mosque in Hartlepool, so that the Jamaat would have a centre and a place to worship and a place to gather.
By that time, more and more people came, and he said to me that we should look for a site for a mosque. So he made the inquiries with the local council, and after a while, I think they identified 19 sites we could view. And during this time, he contracted cancer of the esophagus. He had to undergo certain treatments. But I remember going around a number of sites which the council had identified, and we thought they all weren't suitable. And the last one, I think, was Broome Terrace. And I said to him, this might not be a very good site, because as a senior crime officer, I was called to that site many times, being broken into. It was a children's clinic on the site. I said it might not be a suitable site, but he says, no, we'll go for that site. So he made further inquiries. And by this time, his condition had deteriorated. He was becoming weaker, but he got in touch with the council. And I think the year was 2000, where he informed the council we were interested in purchasing the site in Broome Terrace, and they quoted a price of £60,000. And by February, the end of February 2000, Dr. Khan passed away in June.
And I remember that probably the last conversation I had with my father, Dr. Hamid Khan, was probably a week, 10 days before he passed away. After that, obviously, I did talk to him a little bit, but this was the last proper conversation I had with him. And he said to me that I know I'm going to die soon because my health is like this. But he said that throughout your life, I've only got one piece of advice for you, and that is to stay close to Khalifa Waqt. He said, if you do that, then I've got no reason to worry for you. But if you don't, then I do. So I'll never forget those words. And I know obviously he prayed for me, and my mother, she will have prayed for this in her life as well. And the sacrifices that they made was the reason that Allah, I'm sure, has given me this privilege, because I know there's thousands and thousands of people within our Jamaat, not speaking externally, but within our Jamaat, who are much more talented and capable. But Allah has given me this opportunity for the last few years to serve Hazrat Khalifah Masih V as his press secretary, but also to learn from him, to see how he works, and to be able to spend a lot of time with him and to travel with him. And so the thing is, that is only because of the blessings, I'm sure, of what my elders did.
उसके अखलाक निराले थे, अदाएं थीं अजीब, हार्टलीपूल में कल
What is your time?
say to them?
No, I mean, what did you tell them when you invited them? How long they were expecting to remain with us?
Didn't give any time.
Huh? You always play safe, huh?
In April 2003, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community was left mourning following the passing of Hazrat Mirza طاہر Ahmad. Before his demise, the Khalifa had appointed Maurice Mahmoud to the Global Electoral College, which would name his successor.
I went and joined the election, you see. I was very concerned about it because, you know, it's a very, there's only 100, and it's a very important meeting to go to. God's going to appoint the Khalifa. And someone got up and said, well, will the people stand up so we can see them, you see? Well, I didn't even turn around because I thought, well, even if I see them, I don't know who they are. And then the way went through, and then when the person, Khalifa's name was called out, everyone's had shut up just like that. It's amazing. And everybody went up and embraced us. Over a very, very emotional time.
Hazrat Mirza مسرور Ahmad, the new Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, now reinvigorated the Hartlepool Mosque project. In 2004, he visited Hartlepool and laid the mosque foundations. A year later, he returned for the inauguration.
आज इस मस्जिद के इफ्ताह के मौके पर यहाँ के पुराने अहमदियों को यकीनन उन दो मुखलिसीन की याद भी आ रही होगी जो यहाँ के इब्तदाई अहमदियों में से हैं जिन्होंने यहाँ जमात कायम की. आज डॉक्टर हमीद खान साहब और साजिदा हमीद साहिबा की रूह भी इस मस्जिद की तामीर का सवाब हासिल कर रही होगी. उनको भी ये सवाब मिल रहा होगा जिनकी कोशिशों से ये रकबा ख़रीदा गया और उनकी शदीद ख्वाहिश पर ये मस्जिद बन भी गई अल्लाह के फजल से. इन दोनों फ़िदायीन के लिए भी दुआ करें. अल्लाह ताला उनके दर्जात बुलंद फरमाए और उनकी नस्लों को भी अहमदियत का हकीकी खादिम बनाए. This mosque will become a symbol of mutual love and friendship and serve as a milestone amongst people of all faiths, and that from here a message will spread of the love of God who has unlimited love for His creation. May Allah cause the feelings of love and affection to increase in us.
I remember once Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, a few years ago, said to me that the UK's attention to building new mosques started with the Hartlepool Mosque, and after that they started building more. And we see that in the last 10 years there's been many, many mosques that have been built here in the UK, and there's more in the future in the pipeline. The other thing I always remember is that when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V came to open the mosque, after the reception, Hazur returned to our family home, which was the residence. And when I went into the room where Hazur was seated in the lounge, at the time there was nobody else there. And I went to Hazur, and just out of my excitement and happiness, I said that Hazur, it seemed to me impossible that we would have this mosque in Hartlepool. And I'll never forget Hazur's words. He said to me that that is what Allah Ta'ala does. He turns the impossible into the possible.
The Khalifa told him he couldn't go. He had until he'd made a community in Hartlepool. And so I think this is why we have a community in Hartlepool, because the Khalifa wanted it. Yeah.
We thank you, Allah. We thank you, Allah, for giving us Khilafah. We thank you, Allah. We thank you, Allah. We thank you, Allah, for giving us Khilafah. We thank you, Allah. Thank you. We thank you, Allah. Thank you. We thank you, Allah, for giving us Khilafah. We praise you, Allah. We praise you, Allah. We praise you, Allah, for giving us Khilafah. We thank you, Allah. We thank you, Allah. We thank you, Allah, for giving us Khilafah.